Welcome to the Indie Author Showcase. I'm Chad Robert Morgan, multi-award-winning author of The Baby Eater.
And for once, he's making me not film this at 9 at night, 10 at night, 11 at night.
Well, one of the reasons why we're doing it so early is because we're interviewing our friend that we met at WonderCon, Todd Fahnestock, right? And he is a epic fantasy writer,
Yeah.
and we will be interviewing him in just a moment. Fantastic guy, but he is in the Mountain Time Zone, which is an hour ahead of us, so we had to film a little bit early to accommodate his schedule.
Yeah.
So, um, so without further ado, let's get into the interview with Todd.
Yay!
So we're here with Todd Fahnestock. Did I get that right?
Hi, how's it going? Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, professional podcaster tip number one: get the name of the author correct. With professionals here.
Professionals.
Yeah, you know those, like, you ever go to like a class reunion or a family gathering, and you got like that one like dude that you haven't talked to in 20 years, or brother-in-law that you don't like, and everything like that. You're like, dude, like, we just started a podcast, right? Yo, check us out. That's us.
Yeah.
We're those amount of people right now. So, but thank you for joining the podcast. I'm sure the 3 listeners that we have so far will really appreciate this.
2.5.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So, brief history: we met you at WonderCon this year. So you were the booth not next to us because that one was empty, but the booth right after that one.
Mm-hmm.
And how did WonderCon treat you? How was that for you?
It was great. I actually really like that show. We signed up to go again next year. So
I can't remember if we signed up yet or not. We really enjoyed it. A lot of people were complaining that it was slow. And I'm like,
really?
If that's slow, sign me up,
yep.
man.
Aces for me. Yeah.
Compared to, because we've had the opportunity to borrow a booth at San Diego Comic-Con for a couple times. So compared to that, but it was on an Easter Sunday and it was raining. So
yeah,
everybody was saying that was why it was slow. But in spite of that, I thought we were doing pretty busy.
Agreed. I mean, I have a pretty go or no go policy when it comes to a new con that I go to. I mean, I have to make at least a certain amount to cover costs and to make a little bit of a profit. And WonderCon made that and then some. So I was very happy.
Same with us, although it was really nice that we were at the small press tables.
Yeah.
Like, if we had a full-blown booth, I probably would not have made that threshold like you're talking about, but the small press tables that we were all located in was very reasonably priced.
I think for the traffic that we had, it was a steal, honestly.
Yeah. We went the year before just to kind of scope it out, and it wasn't nearly as populated with indie authors. So I was really pleased to see how much that area had grown in just 1 year. That was really nice to see.
Yeah.
So Todd, tell us a little bit about the books you write.
Well, mostly I write high fantasy. That is to say, kind of Lord of the Ringsian kind of fantasy, except my brand is edge of your seat epic fantasy. So essentially it's epic fantasy with, generally speaking, the good guys win in the end, but in my stories it moves along really fast. One of the big comments I have from a lot of reviewers is, okay, I started reading this at 9 o'clock right before bed and it's now midnight and I don't want to put it down. That's kind of the sort of feedback that I get for this style of epic fantasy.
What drew you to, did you have a question?
I was going to ask the question you were probably going to ask.
Go ahead, you ask.
So what made you decide to start writing fantasy in the first place?
It's a good question. There's actually a bit of a long answer for that. When I was 14, my parents divorced. And I mean, come on, I'm Gen X. We were the latchkey kid generation. There was a lot of that going on. But a lot of what I saw from my friends was a real destructive behavior, right? I mean, my brother vandalized somebody's game room. I had a friend who like pumped weights and then would beat people up. I mean, there was lots of destructive behavior happening for these kids whose parents had divorced. Me, I fell into escapism. I fell into epic fantasy novels. Lloyd Alexander, Terry Brooks, Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman became my world. And pretty much every chance I could, between classes, at lunch, after school, I had my nose in a book. And so essentially what happened from that is that later, once I realized what an amazing thing that had been for me, I mean, that kind of got me over the hump. It got me the bridge from where I was frustrated and alone and confused and in despair and that sort of thing about how my family unit was crumbling, to a little bit later where I'm like, okay, stuff happens and you got to just kind of pedal forward and hopefully make good choices. And I realized that that bridge for me was fantasy books. And I thought, if I could give that to just one other young kid, that would be worth becoming an author for. And so that's how I started writing. In high school, I started writing fantasy novels, and that's why I'm still doing it today.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I had a kind of a similar experience when I started writing because my parents divorced as well when I was about maybe 6. And my mother lived in Long Beach, and she would insist that she would have me for the summer and holidays. And so school gets let out. I have to say goodbye to all my friends, leave Indio to go to Long Beach, where I didn't know anybody. My mom kind of moved around a little bit. And on top of that, her and my stepfather would drink like heavily. So there's times I wouldn't see them for days, right? Because by the time they came staggering in, I was already in bed asleep. So that became my escapism as well of writing and stuff like that. And at first I just started writing like teenage angsty drama crap that nobody in their right mind would ever want to read. But eventually I leaned into what I feel is my birthright, being born on October 31st, and started getting into horror.
Nice. There you go.
One of the reasons why, because I've actually been listening to the first Wildmane book, and
cool.
And I am enjoying it. Fantasy is not my genre of choice. I am enjoying it in spite of that. But I do see in that book some of the things that typically detract me from those, and it's not just fantasy, certain types of sci-fi as well, where you have so much world building that has to happen. And it kind of reminds me of David Lynch's Dune, where just the whole opening is just this narration drop, where even fans of the book is like, huh? So how do you tackle the challenge of the world, of delivering that world building to your reader?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Threadweavers is an early example of my work. So I was still, when I was writing Threadweavers, kind of trying to model myself after what had gone before. And frankly, epic fantasy is, chock-a-block full of these long descriptions, long involved world building. And actually, there's a huge audience that loves that stuff. That is what they show up for when they come to read epic fantasy. And I think that Wildmane is kind of my homage to that kind of fantasy. But I tell you, how far are you into that story?
I'm around chapter 53, I believe, is where I'm
53. At. Okay. It should start moving. Yeah, it should have started moving a while ago. It starts to wind up. Yeah. So that world building. So I would say that when I was writing that, I was kind of trying to emulate those that I had come before. And as I mentioned before, my Edge of Your Seat epic fantasy brand now is slightly different than that. So let's say you had picked up Kaiven the Unkillable, which is my most recent project that I'm working on. That thing starts off with a bang. I mean, like, you are immediately in this coup. People are being killed everywhere. Somebody's taking over this particular kingdom. Then we flash to this gladiator. And the way that I do world building in this particular case is organically, like what I call on the fly. So all of the little bits of world building happen as the character is being developed, and they happen as the plot is moving forward. Little less so with Wildbane. Like I said, it was a little bit more traditional when I was doing that. But if you'll notice, when you get to book 2, I mean, it's gonna pop from that point forward. That's when I was kind of hitting my stride and getting into the type of fantasy writing that I do now, where, I mean, I get bored, right? And so I want to kind of move past the stuff that might be a little bit slower, but still, like I said, it's epic fantasy. So you got to offer that stuff, because there's a huge audience of people that loves that stuff. So doing that deep world building, including all of that stuff in there, I think if you can do it while you're wrapping it into the story. So I teach a class on this, actually, that's called Building Better Beginnings. And essentially what we do is we talk about the first page, and we talk about the 3 main components of a story. You've got plotting, you've got you've got character. So, excuse me, setting, and you've got character, right? And a lot of times, like, you go read through a book and you can circle sentences that are all setting, right? I mean, this is what you're talking about, right? Where it's like, you know, you're describing the desk, and you're describing the floor, and you're describing the archway, and you're describing, you know, the courtyard and all of that stuff, right? So that's all pure setting. And then you've got character development, where somebody is thinking inside their head about who they are and who they want to be, or the fact that their mother wants to make them dress this way, all of these internal strife things. That's character building, right? And then you've got plot, and that would just be the things that are happening, right? Oh, mom shows up and says, you should have been dressed 15 minutes ago. That's plot. It's driving the story forward, right? So what we teach, I teach this oftentimes with a writer friend of mine, Chris Mandeville. And what we teach in that is that you can build this stuff together organically. So each sentence, if you can, have it do double work. Don't just have it do character. Have it do character and setting. Have it do plot and setting. Have it do character and plot. And sometimes, though not all the time, you can get all 3 wrapped into a sentence. If all of your sentences have 3 of those wrapped in, it's going to get pretty chewy pretty soon. You know, it's sort of heavy and hard to move. But most of the time, if you're paying attention, you can get 2 of those at least in. And that gives you the opportunity, but it moves so fast. So that's the way that I do world building nowadays. I try and wrap it in as the character is moving forward, as the action is happening. And so you get all that deep world building without having to have that, what you're talking about, where you're kind of like, oh, okay, can we get done with the world building part and move on to the story, right?
So you're talking about, you're teaching this as so where do you teach at?
So the places that I've taught, I mean, like, I've done classes in, I mean, not this particular one, but I've done classes in elementary schools. When I had my Wishing World book come out, I would go and I would teach real basic storytelling to these elementary school kids. But mostly I teach at writers' conferences. So Superstars writing seminars, Pikes Peak Writers Conference. I'm actually going up to Wyoming for the Wyoming Writers Conference. I'll be doing some panels and some sort of basic storytelling stuff at Fan Fusion this year. I've got a couple of cool panels that I'm doing there. I did some stuff at Planet Comic-Con this last year, but mostly it's writers' conferences, or sometimes there'll be Zoom calls, writers, like groups outside of conferences that are attached to that organization. So Pikes Peak Writers does Pikes Peak Writers Conference. Sometimes they have these things outside of the conference itself, where they'll have guest authors come in and talk about the stuff that they know. So mostly, I mean, like, I do teach some craft stuff for sure, like the Building Better Beginnings. I'm going to teach a sequence on action writing. I've been told that I do some really good action sequences in books. And then a lot of what I do at Superstars lately has been a workshop that I call Conquering the Con. I also taught that one at 20 Books to 50K, which is a big indie author information exchange, if you will. And that one is all about selling at cons, getting into cons, pretty much doing what you and I were doing at WonderCon. That's pretty much what that's about. And I go through everything from logistics, how do you get started, where do you find the cons, what do you take in your kit, from pens to paper clips to business cards to tablecloths to table banners to book stands. All of that stuff is in the first of two workshops with Conquering the Con. The second one is all about the pitch. It's about the hook. It's about the pitch. Different types of people that walk up to your booth. All of this stuff is stuff that I teach at these conferences.
Where were those conferences 2 years ago when we got started?
Well, you could probably teach that stuff. I watched you guys. You guys are good.
Well, I'll tell you the true story on that. So we started the independent author thing because we had a failed project we were trying to get off the ground. The Last Rite was originally supposed to be a CGI series. It was originally a set of 12 scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all the voice cast recorded that we did basically on a royalty share. I think I owe some of the cast members $20 still at this point.
I'm part of the cast.
You're paid in full, so don't give me that. But what happened was we could never get it funded, and the idea was to go directly to streaming, which at the time we were doing this was a brand new concept, and we could not convince people that this was going to actually work. So it just languished in development hell. We could never get it funded. And then eventually got to the point where you could self-publish audiobooks. So we took the cast recordings, we took the scripts, turned that into a novel, took the cast recordings and spliced that into the dialogue of the audiobook. So that way all that wonderful performance that the cast didn't get wasted.
Nice.
And so it's the only one that's actually done by a full cast that we've done so far because it's just so expensive. So that started the whole indie writing thing. And so I kind of kept rolling with that. And so a couple of years ago, we had my day job, White Moon Dreams. We had hired a new guy as a lead artist. He's actually Chris Williams is actually the guy who helps me with my book covers. And
cool.
And I want to get to your book covers in a bit. I kind of want to dovetail into that in a minute, but we'll get to that. He actually had a booth at San Diego Comic-Con that he was doing for his own, personal studio stuff, and he handed it to the studio to use. Well, the studio didn't have any plans to use it. He didn't have any plans of using it. And once you get into these cons, and I mean, it depends on the size of the con, but once you get in, you get reinvited back typically, and then you're locked in. But that locks other people out, and that's why there's usually like a 5-year waiting list to get into San Diego Comic-Con because they're just waiting for somebody to drop out. So they didn't want to lose the booth. So they were looking for somebody to take it, and they offered it to me. So I actually got the booth at San Diego Comic-Con free of charge.
Oh, cool.
Because I know. It's the only way I would have been able to afford to do it. But we went down there that first year not knowing what the hell we were doing. Chris, my boss, had done it a few times. So he was sort of like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and everything like that. So he was kind of coaching us and mentoring us, but we had no idea what to do. I had never done anything like this before. And I had a buddy come out from Texas to help me out. My old Navy buddy, your Uncle Padre. He's like, well, I'm going to bring my friend Ben. And I'm like, I have no idea who this guy is. And what do we need to do it? He's like, trust me, this guy can sell ice to Eskimos. He's going to be great. And so for 5 days, we're basically watching Ben work the floor. And everything we know about selling at these cons, we basically have cribbed from Ben.
We stole.
That's what cribbing means, basically. So those are the lessons that we learned, but we actually picked up a few lessons from you, because we were talking a little bit about how you were pushing the hardcover to help
Yeah.
to help maximize your profits.
Well, I don't know that I would say I'm pushing it. I put it out there, and people self-select. They select the hardcover. People like hardcovers.
Um, yes and no. I mean, I know what you're saying. You're not like twisting their arm saying you really want the
Yeah,
hardcover.
you know.
Yeah, but we took your advice, and what we would usually do is we would put the paperbacks up front, and then the hardcovers, and then display the hardcovers, and people were typically buying the paperback because it was cheaper, it was easier to get in. But taking a cue from one of your suggestions is that we put the hardcover up front. And what we did notice is we did see a noticeable uptick in hardcover sales when we did that. So
Yeah.
yeah, and again, it's not pushing it on them, but it's definitely kind of
No, I mean, for me, the main reason I started putting the hardcovers up front is like they are more money, but also they look better, right? I mean, like
true.
it's a better presentation in the front. I always keep paperbacks right there on the table, though, so that if somebody's like, "Oh, hardbacks are too expensive," I'm like, "That's totally cool. I get that. They're too expensive for me a lot of the time too." So we've got paperbacks as well. But there are some people, like there was one guy that really, really wanted to buy one of my one-offs, and I don't have them in hardback yet, and he wouldn't buy one. He's like, I don't buy paperback. I only buy hardback. So it's a whole different market. It's offering people what it is that they want. I mean, it does create problems with inventory. You've got inventory that you got to keep, or at least I do, and I've got probably $6,000 worth of books in my house. I need a freaking storage unit at this point. And everything you have to have twice, right? I mean, if you got hardbacks, you got to have it in hardback, and you got to have it in paperback. And I mean, you definitely have to have less of each than if you just had one of the, one of the type. But it makes ordering a little more difficult. But I love it. I mean, ever since I started offering hardbacks, my revenue has gone up because people will select them.
I that's one of the reasons I typically go with because I publish my books in various self-publishing formats. Obviously Amazon, but I also do Barnes and Noble Press. And one of the reasons
Mhm.
why I do that is supposedly to get in the Barnes and Noble. Uh, Hasn't happened yet, but that's what you're supposed to be able to do. But the other is I think those hardcovers come out really, really nice.
Yeah. Especially if you want like not case bind, but like the sleeve wrap,
Yeah.
the full wrap of so it's like a cloth hardback, and then around it goes the dust jacket. Amazon does not do that. They just do the case bind, where the cover is straight, printed straight onto the hardback hardback book. So, but I tell you, I love those case binds, and I find that more and more people are liking them also. I mean, like dust jackets are nice, but they get ripped sometimes. And case bind, like you got to drop it pretty hard, or you got to poke it with something pretty hard before it gets ripped. And I think because there are so many of them now, because Amazon is doing those now, they're almost becoming more prevalent than the dust jacketed hardcovers.
Yeah, I agree. Dust jackets are worse in my opinion. They get bended. One, they get folded,
Yeah.
and that's not nice. Two, if you're holding them, it just feels a lot more slippery, and sometimes they slip off.
So you're saying I should burn all my dust jacket covered books now?
No, no,
Just get a nice bonfire going.
no. I'm not saying. I'm not
Some people
speaking.
prefer the dust jacket. I mean, again, it comes down to preference. There are some people who feel like the real hardcover is the dust jacket hardcover, and I don't blame them. I mean, like if that's what they grew up with and that's what they want, if you can give that to them, then that's an extra advantage that you have at the table. You know what I mean?
We had touched briefly on book covers because I mentioned Chris helping me with mine. Your
Yeah.
Threadweaver series. One of the things I thought was really nice about that was if you put all the covers together, that forms a nice panoramic.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
that was cool. I like that. So what was the how did that come about? What was the thought process? What were the challenges in
So
that?
So interesting. That was so my artist Rashid Alacroca and I have worked together for years at this point. But the Wild Mane Threadweavers series was the first set of covers, A, he had ever done, and B, I had ever commissioned from him. And so I didn't know him that well. He was essentially, he went to school at CU Boulder and he studied to be an engineer, but he had this artistic talent and he always wanted to do art. And so he was doing this on the side and he tried to charge me nothing. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll give you these for free. And I'm like, Rashid, you gotta let me pay you something, right? So he allowed me to pay him a criminal $100 per cover for that series. And we built it together. And the reason that they're kind of, so those of you who haven't seen the cover, character on it, as well as a scenery in the background that connects up, and each character connects to the other character from book to book, and each character is shown pretty much from like the rib cage down from the back, like they're all standing facing away except for maybe Threads of Miriam where he's kind of sideways, but like they're pretty much, you don't see their faces. They're just all these sort of almost anonymous looking people in this fantasy setting, but the background connects. And like the first one is Wildmane standing with his sword down and his hand is touching Mirila's hand, and Mirila has got her hand out and she's like wielding magic. And then it goes to the next one where Mershane is leaning against the tree, and the fourth one is on the other side of the tree. There's a woman looking off into the distance and there's dragons there, right? So I wasn't sure how good he was going to be. So I'm like, let's not give him anything hard like faces or any sort of dynamic poses or whatever. So that's how we came up with this. But clearly, I needn't have worried. He did an amazing job with them. And then I went on to do everything with him. And his faces are the best thing that he does. So I should, like I said, I should never have worried, but he was new to me back then. And together we came up with that sort of daisy chain cover idea, so that, like you said, all four books end up with a panorama.
So you're mentioning a little bit about you teaching and everything like that. I know that you are publishing a book. I believe it's this Tuesday.
Yeah, it's next Tuesday. This one
Next
came on
Tuesday.
fast. Yeah, next Tuesday. Crazy, Tuesday the 7th, I believe. It's called Falling to Fly. Yeah, this was a weird project. It sort of, so I've been meaning for years to do a book on the craft of writing, something like Stephen King's On Writing, or, Save the Cat writes a novel. Any of those things, they essentially talk about story. And I'm like, you know what? I've got a few original things I could throw in there. And I've been kind of cataloging them all along the way. So this is what this book was supposed to be. So what happened was, but I wanted it to be, have you ever read On Writing by Stephen King?
It's been a while, but yeah,
Okay.
way back in the day.
So he divides it into two sections. One he calls his CV, and one is his tool bag, right? And his CV is about these, it's just a collection of stories from his life about things that happened in his writer's life. And then, essentially his curriculum vitae, right? Where he's like laying out all of this stuff that made him what he was as a writer. And then he gave the tool bag, which was like, this is what I use to help me write. And he talks about things like using adverbs. He talks about things like dialogue tags. He talks about all of this stuff that he uses on a daily basis with writing. All of it is fascinating. Recommend that book to anyone. But what I found the most compelling were the stories about his life, right? So as I was sitting down to write this book about what I know about the craft of writing, I was like, I want to do what he did, but I don't want to chunk it out. Like, I don't want to do this chunk is about my life and this chunk is about what I know about writing. So what I wanted to do was kind of organically weave it in. Like, these are the stories in my life that led up to me learning about node writing. These are the stories in my life that led up to me doing this organic, mixing together of the character setting and plot, moving things fast. This is what led up to me wanting to write action scenes the way that I do. All of that stuff, right? It was the way it was supposed to go. That's not the way that it went. I mean, I kind of went into a fugue. I wrote this book, 46,000 words in about a month. And it just like the stories kept coming out. And I'm like, you know what? Since the stories are coming, I'll just let them flow. And then I'll go back and I'll attribute them where they need to go. And I got to the end of it, and it just felt like this disjointed mess that was not doing what I wanted it to do. And I handed it off to my assistant, Becca, whom you've met, or at least talked to. And I said, I don't know I don't think this is doing what I needed to do. I need to go back and uproot this. Read it. Let me know what you think. So she read it. She, got back to me, and I said, so I have decided I need to uproot this thing from the beginning, and maybe keep 30% of it, and then weave in all the things that what I was supposed to be talking about learning how to write. And she said to me, she's like, don't touch it. You've got lightning in a bottle here, and you're talking about taking the cap off and polishing the inside of the bottle. She's like, don't touch it. And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a book about learning how to write. She's like, no, it's a book about perseverance, and it's a book about inspiration. And she's like, I think you should put it out exactly as it is. And I'm like, that is complete BS. And I'm going to go and I'm going to revise it. She's like, okay, I tell you what, you give it to me for 2 weeks. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to get 6 of your super fans, and I'm going to hand it off to them. And then we're going to have a Zoom call, and you don't get to say anything. You're going to be muted, and you're going to have your camera off, and you're just going to listen to what they discuss. And she's like, and if I'm right, you leave it the way that it is. And if you're right, then do whatever you want with it. And I was like, okay, you got 2 weeks. So we sent it out to this group. I went to the Zoom call, and sure enough, she was right. They loved it. And I'm telling you, I'm not kidding. This is not just me tooting my own horn. I was like ready to trash this thing. And she convinced me that it needs to go out into the world. So I'm still a little bit nervous about it, but I'm kind of gotten on board with it. That is what this book is. But it is a book about how I came to be a writer. All of the things that I tried to do. I mean, I've been traditionally published. I've been published with HarperCollins. I've been published with Tor. I've been published with Harper Prism. Excuse me. And each time, like, I've had these ups and downs where it's like, yay, we're the next big thing, and then crash and burn, and then yay, and then crash and burn. And I mean, I've just done this over and over again. And finally, I'm starting to build an audience. I'm starting to have a certain level of success, and this book is all about that. It's all about the book to read before you give up on your writing dreams, because sometimes it takes a little while to get it going, and sometimes there's just a lot of stuff in there for that. So that is what this book ended up being. It's just me telling the truth about the writing industry, the publishing industry, and my failures and my successes in that industry.
What I find fascinating about that, and here, I think this is an interesting question, because most indie authors I know are going the indie route because they're new and they want to get in, and trying to go through there's too much of a, the entry level is too high to get into traditional publishing, right? You can't get into the publisher unless you have an agent. Can't get into the agent unless you convince him. Classic story of people like J.K. Rowling, that they shipped Harry Potter to 20 different people before somebody finally gave her a shot, and all the hundreds of people that turned her down are kicking themselves in the butt right now.
Yeah, they are.
Story. Kid Wizard, why did I? That kind of thing.
Dune's got a similar story. Dune went to 23 publishers before somebody picked it up, and now every freaking generation is trying to remake that story in cinema for the next generation. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, there's stories, a lot of stories like that.
So my question for you though is that if you're traditionally published, what made you go back to the indie route?
Yeah, so the just bald truth of it is that they didn't sell to expectation. They wanted them to sell, 10,000 copies, and they only sold 8,000 copies. And so they're like, we're done.
Oh, only 8,000. I wish we had those kind of
problems. Right. But I mean, like that's the formula that they're using. They're like, okay, we're putting this out. We need it to sell 10,000 copies. If it sells 9,999, we got the next person on the cycle. We're going to put them in and see if they sell 10,000 copies. And it's all based on, I mean, it's not all based on, but I think that the advance it factors into that. If they give you a $26,000 advance, and you only are going to get, say, 10% of the royalties, they need that now to sell $260,000 to justify it, right? So if it doesn't, then we lost money, you're out. It's an equation. So it just, I mean, and I was giddy to be published both times. And honestly, I enjoyed my interactions with the people in the trad publishing industry immensely. I mean, Tor Books was great to me. I flew out there and I got to see Tom Doherty, this fantasy publishing legend, in his office. This is in the book, by the way. And he has the office in the Flatiron building. Like, did you ever see the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, the first Spider-Man movie?
Yeah,
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, where you got was it J.K. Simmons who was
Yeah.
playing J. Jonah Jameson in that? His office, that's Tom Doherty's office. Like he's like right there on the corner of the Flatiron building. That's I mean, like in the movie, they make it much larger than it actually is in the building. But like that corner office right there at the end of the Flatiron building, that's where Tom Doherty worked. It was great. So I got to be up in that office. I got to meet him, shake his hand. He took us to lunch. I mean, like it was such a great experience, but it's a business, right? I mean, the traditional publishing industry and the indie publishing industry, they're not here to make your dreams come true. They're here to make their dreams come true, right? And you got to navigate that as best you can. You know, I mean, I think there's always room to pay it forward, to help someone else level up, but you got to level yourself up too. Right. And you'll get, I mean, I've had so many favors from so many people that helped me level up. But in the end, everybody's got their own agenda that they want to accomplish. And you got to jockey in there and have your agenda front of mind and try and look out for yourself, even as you're building your career with these relationships, you know, because they're not going to wait for you. If you put your book out and it doesn't sell to expectation, that's just the way that it goes. You jump into the next cycle and try and climb the hill again.
So we are definitely getting to the end of time, and I'm afraid Google Chat's going to cut us off if I go too much longer. So,
Yeah.
To wrap up, tell everybody where they can find you. Like, what's the next convention you're doing? Where can they find your books? That kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So the next convention I'm doing is Fan Fusion in Phoenix. I'll be one of their honored literary guests while I'm out there. After that, I'll be at the Wyoming Writers Conference up in Casper, Wyoming. And you can find me at toddfahnestock.com. That's TODDFAHNESTOCK.com. I imagine you can throw that up on the screen. And then I'm on Facebook as well. You can find me, Todd Fahnestock, author, on Facebook. That's where I do a lot of social media. I'm also on Instagram. And yeah, aside from that, head out to a con. I'm at a lot of cons this year. I'll probably be at 16, 17 cons this year.
Can you imagine if we did 16, 70? I think we're doing like 4 this year.
I did 21 last year. That just about broke me. So I'm scaling back a little bit this year.
Well, I tell you, Todd, you're the first guest we've had on what is basically a brand new podcast, and I was nervous as hell because I was like, "Oh my God, I'm going to sound like an idiot. I'm going to totally crash and burn," and you have made this very painless for us. Because as you can tell, we are two broke bastards that don't know what the hell they're doing, and we are podcasting from our kitchen table.
That's not true. From our professional office building, actually.
Yeah, our professional office building. Yes, the dog is running around, and then the phones are ringing and everything.
We have a very busy office building.
Yeah. But I just want to say thank you very much for this. This has been a great experience, both just talking to you, and also this was a really great first interview for us for the podcast. So yeah, it's not like I use words for a living or anything like that.
Not like at all.
But no, this was great. Thank you very much, Todd.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Of course. So yeah, definitely check out Todd's stuff. We will be doing a review of his first book in the Threadweaver series as soon as we can get through it, because
It's big.
it is a little beefy.
It's big. It's a big boy.
I could tell you, just kind of spoilery, I'm about 2/3 away and I'm liking it. We talked a little bit about the world building. I did think that was a little bit of a drag in the beginning, but once I kind of got through that, it kicked up and it got going. So I'm about 2/3 of it, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying his magic system in the world. of how magic in general works in his world. So I'm looking forward to doing a full review of that in the next episode. Hopefully by the next episode. By the next episode, we will also talk a little bit about Pubby.
Yay.
Yeah, well,
We mentioned it
we
last time.
mentioned it last time. We tried to get a book, did not go well. Was a really bad book. We found another one, a collection of short stories that was much better. Granted, the last guy didn't set the bar very high, but was at least readable. So we're going to talk a little bit more about our experiences with Pubby and whether or not it's worth your time in the next episode. So that we'll have the book of short stories. We'll have Todd's first book in the Threadweaver series to talk about. And after that, one thing I was arguing about with myself, or toying with the idea, is maybe trying to do a live podcast with some of the other indie authors at Monsterpalooza. So my thought is we can meet with the authors, we can invite them to do a podcast with us at the booth before the start of the show, before people get busy, because of course these people have got to run their booths, so they're not going to take time out. And actually do it from the floor of Monsterpalooza. What do you think?
I mean, I'd be down.
You be down?
A little tired probably, because I'm assuming we have to get there early, but like,
I don't think we have to get there like drastically early. I think because we're not going to have time to cut and edit while on the floor, so it's going to be more of a uh, more snippets of people saying this is me, this is my stuff, and everything like that, and this is how they can find me. And then after Monsterpalooza, um, well, or we can live stream it too. That's possible. So that actually might be beneficial because then people could see before going to Monsterpalooza who these people are. That could be interesting too. So, and we've never done that before, so that would be a new experience.
that would be,
That would be fun. That would be challenging.
yeah.
So again, Monsterpalooza is at the end of this month. We're working very hard to try to get ready for that. That's May 31st, June 1st, and June 2nd in Pasadena. Then we got a nice couple months before we get ready for our back-to-back conventions. We got HorrorCon in Los Angeles, and then we have Creep IE Aftermath in Ontario. And then about a month after, not even a month after that, a few weeks after that, it's going to be Son of Monsterpalooza in Burbank. And that one's going to be a little bit smaller than the other ones that we're doing. Um, so we're just going to have a table there. It's going to be a much more um, that's sort of like our victory lap at that point,
Hmm.
if it makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So definitely see us then. Check out Todd's stuff. We will be posting links and everything. If you have questions of the show or feedback, we do have an email address that they can email us to now.
Yay!
Yay! Because feedback from the internet never goes bad.
Never.
And it's simply IAW for Indie Author Showcase. Sorry, IAS. I don't know where the W came from. So the email is simply IAS for Indie Author Showcase at spectralinkproductions.com.
Yep.
So, and that's us here at Spectral Ink Productions. All right. So if you have any questions, any comments, anybody that you would recommend for us to interview or to review on
As
the
long as
podcast,
they're an indie author, they have to be an indie author.
they have to be an indie author or from a small press publishing. So yeah, no random house people or anything like that, but small press works as well. And no like erotica, no how to, overthrow the government in 3 easy steps or anything like that. Um, but yeah, mainly fiction. But yeah, send us your recommendations. We'd love to hear it. And we're always looking for more people to read and review. We got a few people on our list, but obviously we're going to burn through them eventually. So uh, we want to grow our list, and the whole purpose of the podcast is to expose indie authors to the public. So the more in the authors that we could read, review, and interview, the more we're accomplishing that goal. So until next time, I'm Chad.
I'm Alex.
And
And
this
let's
is
get ice cream.
and let's get ice cream. And this is
Hey, you agreed. You agreed.